there's a rational argument that you could make that, well, they just need to leave because they can't afford to live here anymore. If you've been living here for the last 40, 50 years, you don't see it that way. Like, this is your home.
I'm here today with Phil, a volunteer and community lead at ShelterTech. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Henry.
First question is, why are there so many homeless people in San Francisco?
Homelessness is a pretty difficult, complex issue, and there's not an easy answer for any of these questions. So of course, you walk around the streets of San Francisco, you think, how could this be happening? In terms of an individual state, there are a number of different factors that could cause someone to experience homelessness, whether that's a change in job, whether that's a change in their family situation. Many folks may also suffer from mental health issues. Specifically within the Bay Area, there are a number of really interesting things that have sort of led to the situation that we see here today. Probably the largest of which is a lack of affordable housing. It's a combination of rapidly increasing rent prices and the cost of living and jobs within the tech sector to a large extent, coupled with the fact that there are lots of people who live here and difficulties in zoning laws for building new housing. So if you think about San Francisco as a space, we're a 7x7 square mile area as a city, and there's only so many places that you can build other than going up. The rate at which housing has increased, the development of new housing, has been significantly less than the increase in demand of housing, which is a pretty significant contributing factor to why there are so many people that are experiencing homelessness now.
Would you say that a lot of these homeless people are people who originally lived in SF, or did they come from elsewhere?
Anywhere from 7,000 to 8,500 people experiencing homelessness on any given night on the streets of San Francisco, and roughly 21,000 people over the course of the year who experienced homelessness at some point, 70% of whom lived in San Francisco before they found themselves homeless on the street.
What is the city doing to alleviate this? And also, what are the nonprofits out there doing to help?
So the city of San Francisco today spends roughly $300 million out of their budget on homelessness issues. Now, a good chunk of that, I think over 2/3, is spent actually on housing and preventing people from becoming homeless in the first place. The remaining third is distributed to programs like navigation centers, which are 24-hour centers where people can come. They can find storage for their belongings, they can find a bed, they can find storage for pets or loved ones, and gets funneled through a number of different organizations as well, including shelters and including a whole host of nonprofit organizations that work in the city. Everything from Glad Memorial is probably one of the more famous ones over in the Tenderloin. So they serve meals every day, 365 days a year. They also have some shelter beds, I believe. All the way through, there are services like Lavame that operate mobile shower systems. And so you might see, if you're ever walking around in the Tenderloin, you might see a truck that's set up on the side of the road that says Lavame on the side. So those are portable showers that come in and offer hygiene services to people in the community.
What is the biggest barrier that's preventing homeless people from getting off the street? Like, people who don't know too much about homelessness would just say, oh, why can't they just get a job at McDonald's and be able to start making money and get off the streets that way? How would you answer that?
There are a number of different incentives that just work really differently for someone experiencing homelessness than for you or I. So for example, there are housing programs, and there's something called general assistance. There are social welfare programs that function only if you're below a certain level of income on a monthly basis. So you can get long-term housing, you can get some form of income and support, but you have to make under a certain amount of income. The delta between that threshold and how much it would cost to actually live in San Francisco is pretty significant. And so it's a tough situation. I actually don't have a good answer for you. I just know that it's not as simple as just go get a job and then you can pay rent. Now, there is a very real possibility that many people could find jobs elsewhere and move away and find housing there. And I don't know why people don't do that. I also don't know how complex that would be. It's honestly, it's something that I wrestle with too, because if I'm being logical or like pragmatic, I would think, well, if I don't have enough, like me personally, not generally, but if I don't have enough money to live where I am, then I'll just leave and go somewhere else and make money there, and then I can live there. Well, that sounds really simple on paper. In practice, if you just found yourself suddenly homeless and you didn't have family anywhere, you didn't know where to go next, one, you have to figure out, well, where am I going to go? How am I going to know that I'll be able to find housing there that'll be any more stable? A lot of folks who experience homelessness in SF, again, have been here, have been living here. This is their home. You can see this in the Mission District where I live, where there are people who can't afford to live there anymore, and there's a rational argument that you could make that, well, they just need to leave because they can't afford to live here anymore. If you've been living here for the last 40, 50 years, you don't see it that way. Like, this is your home. And so you're not necessarily going to think of it as, well, I can't afford to live here anymore, so I'll just move somewhere else where I can. There are communities, there are networks, there are people who love being here and want to try and stay here in whatever way they can.
How did you get involved with Shelter Tech, and what do you guys do?
So Shelter Tech is a volunteer organization here in San Francisco. We've been around for about 3 years now. And broadly, we're a 100% volunteer organization, which means no one works at Shelter Tech full time. And what we do is we build technology products and solutions to support people experiencing homelessness and then the broader low-income community here in San Francisco. I was introduced to some folks at Shelter Tech, largely because I lived in the Tenderloin when I first moved to San Francisco, and I worked a tech job. And we had a very, in many ways, stereotypical experience in the sense that it was a bit lavish. I worked in the mobile advertising space. You'd walk into our office and there was like a 40-foot T-Rex in the lobby. We had a ball pit and food every day. And the juxtaposition between going to work every day in a space like that and then walking outside and there are anywhere from 1 to a dozen people that are sleeping on the streets who clearly have mental health issues, who are clearly struggling, felt odd for me. And so I started volunteering with a couple different organizations in the area, giving out food at a soup kitchen or preparing meals that get delivered to the elderly, which are all great, but I couldn't help but feel like there was a better way for me to volunteer than to go and spend my time doing something that is probably the least efficient way for me to spend my time. Like, by trade, I don't prepare food. And so it didn't strike me as the best way for me to give back. Like, I'd rather give back with my mind. And so that's how I found Shelter Tech. I was playing basketball actually with a friend, and he said, hey, you should meet my friend. He volunteers with this organization called Shelter Tech. I think you'd think it's really cool. Went to a volunteer event that we operate called a Datathon. So one of the initiatives that Shelter Tech really focuses on is events that bring together people from the tech community and members of the homeless community, both to build things together, to share stories, and also just sort of to build bridges. At that point, I didn't have any friends who had ever been homeless before. I didn't really know what it was like, and just fell in love with the model and the people and the team. And I've been volunteering with Shelter Tech for going on 2 years now.
What's your biggest learning in this journey, working with homeless communities?
It's a really complicated issue, and it needs more smart people thinking about it, particularly because I'm a volunteer and all of us are volunteers. A lot of my energy is focused not on this issue, and there's only so much that I can get done in the free time that I have. And this is such a complex system. There are over 1,000 services available, hundreds of millions of dollars being spent, thousands of people who are experiencing homelessness, and it still hasn't been solved, right? Which means that it's complicated and needs more smart people thinking about it. So I think that's the number one learning that I've had is everyone cares about the issue of homelessness, but there are not enough people actually working on it to solve it.
For people who are interested in volunteering with Shelter Tech, how can they do that?
Yeah. Check us out at sheltertech.org. You can find information to get in touch with us. My email is phil@sheltertech.org. We also have team meetings every Wednesday night at Code for America in Soma from 6:30 to 7:30, and you're also welcome to drop by and say hello to us there.